talk about the 11 mistakes that employees make when they receive a performance improvement plan or a PIP, and how you can survive your PIP using the hidden secrets that I'm going to discuss in this video. So the first thing that we're going to cover is understanding the PIP process and the real issues behind the PIP. Next, I'm going to show you what to do when you do receive a PIP and how you can handle that. After that, I'm going to show you how you can respond during the course of the PIP so that you can protect your job. And finally, what you can do at the end of the PIP, or at least by the end of the PIP, to be able to either save your job or to move on successfully. So the PIP process, many employees make the mistake that they assume that they've done nothing wrong and that all they have to do is continue doing what they're doing in order to prove that they are performing their job adequately. Well, the problem here is that when you've received a performance improvement plan, somebody is already saying you are not performing up to standards. So the hidden secret here is to be proactive. Don't wait for the end of the process. Start at the beginning of the process. Show that you are meeting expectations from day one, and showing that. And we're going to go over some more of these secrets. Showing how to do that is critical because you need to be documenting what you're doing, so at the end of the process you can say, I've done everything that you've asked me to do. What is there left that I can do to make my performance satisfactory? So another mistake that employees make is assuming that your boss is just being a jerk or is doing something illegal. It's similar to the first mistake, except that here the performance improvement plans are sometimes given to employees who do need to improve their performance. The hidden secret is to look to a third person, a third party, and see what they think about the process. Get your advice from somebody else. Understand what you need to do in order to meet the terms of this PIP. Having somebody who can help you through this process is critical. Whether that's an attorney, a trusted friend, or even a colleague that you may not have a deep relationship with, but who can give you an independent evaluation of your work. Relying on the idea that your boss is a jerk or doing something illegal can end up being a huge downside for you, because what you do is you end up at the end of this having not reacted to what's going on, and therefore you're trapped in the PIP. You haven't done something to be able to get out of the PIP. Another mistake that employees make all the time is believing that HR is somehow their advocate. And if there's an unfair PIP, that HR is going to do something about it. The problem with expecting HR or anybody else to do anything about the PIP is that's not their job. They are not required to do anything on behalf of employees other than run payroll, usually, and to administer benefits. They are otherwise there entirely to represent the interests of management, the people who are giving you the PIP. These are the HR is there not to protect you, it is there to protect management. So my hidden secret is to be your own best advocate. Don't wait for HR. Find somebody else who can help you if you need that, if that's an attorney or a trusted friend. But make sure that make sure that you're not trusting what HR says, and that by the end of this process, you can convince HR that they should be on your side. Show them why they should care that you've done your job and that you shouldn't be fired. Because HR, if you don't do anything at the end of this, HR will side with management and will say this employee should be fired if that's what the result of the PIP is showing, even if you've done everything that you should have done. Once you get your PIP, you need to ask questions. You need to go to the person who's giving you the PIP, whether that's your supervisor or a manager above him, and get clarification about the details. Not getting clarification exposes you later to all sorts of shenanigans, for lack of a better term. That's where employers can say, well, I asked you to complete this project, but then you didn't do X, Y, or Z. Well, they didn't tell you to do X, Y, or Z at the beginning. If you had clarified that at the beginning, you could have done X, Y, or Z, and then you could have met their expectations, and you can prove that. Getting clarifications is critical as to what the expectations are. If you can't get those clarifications, you need to ask somebody, either in HR or elsewhere, what is it that you should be doing? Because otherwise, the employer is or has the ability to simply allow you to fail the PIP based on nothing more than that person's say-so. So the hidden secret is to discuss and confirm any clarifications about what you are expected to do in email with the supervisor. Don't just do it in person, do it via email so that at the end of it, you have documented exactly what you were supposed to do. When you get your PIP, if there is a reason why you should never have gotten the PIP, then you need to ask for it to be withdrawn. Many employees make the mistake of allowing the employer to go forward with a PIP that is based on some kind of unfairness. For example, if an employee gets a PIP because he has missed time, but that time was missed because of federally protected FMLA leave, he should never have gotten that PIP in the first place. That's not unsatisfactory performance. They can't use that against you. But if you don't stop them then, by the end of the PIP, now they've got new reasons to try to fire you. Now it's a performance issue, right? Now you have failed to defend yourself at a point where you're no longer, at a point where you can stop the employer, right? If you go to HR and you say, hey, this guy's going to try to fire me for using my FMLA leave, HR is going to listen to you because they know that there's legal liability out there that could put them in jeopardy. And if somebody says, 6 months, a year down the line, hey, HR person, why didn't you stop this when you knew there was FMLA leave at issue? That person's going to be in real trouble. And that person knows now that they need to avoid that. So the hidden secret is to identify any unfair reasons why the PIP was given in the first place. And if necessary, ask for it to be withdrawn. If there is a problem with why it's being given, ask for it to be withdrawn. If there's some legal basis, or even if you were performing at a satisfactory level and that just has not been taken account in your performance evaluation, do it sooner rather than later. If you go through the PIP process and get to the end, many people get fired even though they could have challenged it at the beginning. You need to make sure that you get objective goals. The mistake is not having expected results that are clearly and provably achievable. If you need to sell 10,000 widgets, make sure that's in there. Don't let somebody tell you it's 10,000 widgets. Get it in writing. Make sure that, and if it's not 10,000 widgets, to say, I want you to sell sufficient widgets. Talk to the supervisor and say, what is sufficient in your mind? I need to know this. If they won't put it in the PIP, put whatever the result of the discussion is into an email and send it to the employer. Send it to your supervisor. Say, hey, during our discussion last week, you told me that by the end of this PIP, I need to have sold 10,000 widgets, and that is sufficient for you. That gives the opportunity then to the supervisor to disagree with it, which most likely he won't do because you're reflecting accurately what he said, and it means that he can't later deny it. Once he's accepted that, once the supervisor has accepted that, he can't later deny that that is what the requirement is. So the hidden secret that I have on this point is to clarify the expectations for every critical element. Okay, every critical element. If you're a federal employee, that is a familiar term. Critical element, meaning if you are failing at 2 out of the 4 critical elements, the 10,000 widgets, and you're supposed to be selling 20,000 of some box of something else, then those are 2 separate critical elements that you're supposed to meet, and you need to have each one of those clarified. If you can't get this clarified, if the supervisor will not clarify for you beyond that it is up to his satisfaction, whatever you're doing is up to his or her satisfaction, you need to ask for an independent evaluator. Get somebody who works for the company or whatever the employer is to independently evaluate your work so that you're not relying solely on your supervisor for your rating. Because if your supervisor is biased against you, he's going to use that unclear expectation, that vague expectation to against you, to fire you. And in all of these cases where somebody is undergoing a PIP, vagueness is the enemy for the employee. Once you've gotten your PIP, you need to look out for unachievable, new, or unexpected goals. If you assume that the PIP's expectations are reasonable and achievable without taking a hard look and saying, is this really a requirement that should be there, you may run into problems later. For example, if somebody, using the example before, somebody says you need to sell 10,000 widgets, but you've never been able to sell 10,000 widgets before, nobody's been able to sell 10,000 widgets before, then you need to bring that to the employer's attention. You need to bring that to the supervisor's attention. Again, preferably documented in an email, in writing, so that they can't deny it later. Tell them, I can't sell 10,000 widgets. Nobody's ever sold above 1,000. If they are new or unexpected goals, this is a slightly different problem. When you have a PIP, they can't just give you a PIP with totally new goals in it. At least in the federal sector, you're required to have to meet the goals that are set forth in your performance plan. They can't change the performance plan and then say you need to meet these goals. If there are new or unexpected goals that are in your PIP, you need to tell the supervisor that, and if the supervisor doesn't listen, go to HR. So the hidden secret is to get clarification before you are being asked to take on unachievable, new, or unexpected goals. And if you can't achieve these goals, or if they are new or unexpected, get rid of them. Go to HR, get rid of them. Once you have your PIP, you're going to go through a process where you are expected to meet, if not weekly, then bi-weekly, maybe even more often than weekly, with your supervisor so that you can talk about your performance. Typically in federal employment, which is where I practice the most, supervisors are required to meet with their employees and give feedback. It's a common practice that they will sit down every week and say, this is what you did, give me a list of what you did, here's my feedback on that. And what you need to do in those meetings, if the person says, if your supervisor says, you didn't meet this critical element, or you didn't meet this action that I wanted you to take, but that's not true, you need to say that. Moreover, you then need to document it in an email. Say, if Mr. Supervisor, for example, says, you were supposed to sell 1,000 widgets this week. I don't see any evidence that you did that. You need to say, well, Mr. Supervisor, I did sell 1,000 widgets. Here is the documentation from that. Here are my sales figures. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to put this in an email later. Put it in the email, send it to him, say, we talked about this during our meeting. You said that I hadn't sold my 1,000 widgets. Here's documentation showing that I did meet that sales goal. And by the way, you need to check this documentation every week before we have our meeting because you seem not to be understanding where to get that information. It means to disagree, but do it nicely and do it in writing. Why do you do it nicely? Because if you're going to antagonize your employer, that can be itself a basis for more negative treatment. You don't want to have a record that shows you and your supervisor getting more and more antagonistic over time, but you need to disagree. Being disagreeable isn't necessarily not being nice. Be nice, don't curse your supervisor, but disagree when you need to disagree. And make sure, as always, keep it in writing. If you say it, put it in writing later. Don't let them have the upper hand by saying, I don't remember us discussing that, or I don't think we ever did discuss that. I would remember something like that. That is a very easy way of getting out of a problem for a supervisor. If you go to meetings with your supervisor where they're supposed to provide feedback, and they stop doing that, for example, document that. You may feel a sense of relief when your supervisor says, the meeting for this week has been canceled. We'll just meet next week and we'll discuss 2 weeks worth of time. Email back and say, I can't accept that. You said you were going to meet with me every week to give me feedback. I want you to meet with me every week and give me feedback. Because what happens is the supervisor says, okay, well, last week we skipped, this week we'll skip again, 3, 4, 5 weeks again we skipped, and at the end of it, you've lost 5 weeks of feedback where you get the opportunity to document what you've done and document that you have met the expectations of the supervisor. Don't lose those opportunities to document that you have been doing what is required. The hidden secret is to document every request that you have for assistance and feedback, and preferably do it in email. Make sure that the supervisor is not going to get away with having no feedback sessions at all. Furthermore, what can happen is if you do document that the supervisor continues to miss meetings with you, continues to not provide feedback, at the end of the PIP process, you can turn to HR, you can turn to labor management relations and say, they were supposed to meet with me every week to do this. He did not do that. And I know the reason why. He's trying to make this an unfair process where he doesn't give feedback, he doesn't give support. And now I'm being pushed out because of his unfairness. There's something else going on here, and this needs to stop. When you have documentation like that, HR's ears are going to prick up and say, wait a minute, what's really going on here? Is there really a good faith effort to terminate somebody who's on a PIP, or is this really a situation where something else is going on, such as discrimination or retaliation? Those are often, the PIP process is very frequently used to get rid of people who have made claims of discrimination in the past, because it's easy to fudge. It's easy to show that somebody isn't performing up to standards when you can just make up whatever you want with vague terms. So documenting the lack of feedback and support shows that there's no good faith in this process, and leads one to conclude that there's something else going on. Another mistake that employees miss in the process is what happens when supervisors start moving the goalposts or imposing new requirements. So moving the goalposts is where a supervisor says at the beginning of the process, I want you to sell 10,000 widgets. And by the end of the process, he's saying, well, really, I expected you to sell 12,000 widgets. That would have been acceptable. That problem can be avoided at the beginning of this process by saying, what are your expectations, and then documenting them. At the end of the process, if you haven't done that, you can still go back to the supervisor and say, now you're saying 12,000, before you were saying 10,000. What has changed? Why are you moving the goalposts? Because moving the goalposts is a way for a supervisor to keep the employee from being able to meet the expectations that he has. As the goalpost moves back, the employee is less and less able to meet it. Employers will do this if they want to fire somebody for an unlawful or some other kind of reason. And so it's important to recognize when those goalposts are being moved and then to document them. New requirements, same thing for new requirements. If the supervisor says you have to sell 10,000 X widgets and you have to sell 10,000 Y widgets, but that wasn't what was said at the beginning of the PIP process, you need to come out and say, no, you told me that I needed to sell 10,000 in order to meet your expectations. Why are you giving me these new requirements? Well, it's the same thing with moving the goalposts. They're just trying to add something on so that you do fail. And if you do fail, then they have an excuse for firing you. So my hidden secret is to document any changes in the expectations and any new requirements that are given to you and any reason for those changes. So if you do get a new requirement or the requirement gets expanded, ask why and document that reason why. If the supervisor doesn't have a good reason or doesn't give you a reason, put that in there. Say, you didn't give me a reason why I should do this. Documenting that will make sure that at the end of the process, any of these changes, you can track these changes. Day 1, you said this. Day 39, you said this. Day 64, you said this. By the end of the process, you had just started making stuff up. That's very strong evidence that the PIP process is being used for reasons other than what it's supposed to be used for. At the end of the PIP process, you want to be sure that you are ready to present your side of the story. You want to be ready so that when you sit down with your supervisor, you can say to your supervisor, I did everything that you expected of me. And when you change those expectations, I did my best to try to meet those as well. You didn't have any good reason for those expectations to be changed. The point of this is really to focus on not just the supervisor, but also HR or labor management relations. Having documentation at the end of this process is critical to being able to save your job. If you're a federal employee, that means you get to take this over to the Merit Systems Protection Board. If you're not a federal employee, but you're a member of a union, then you can use a union grievance process or a similar process to protect your job. But if you don't have that documentation, you aren't going to be able to protect your job. Even if you don't have either the MSPB or a grievance process available to you, HR is going to be there. HR is going to be looking for discrepancies between what the supervisor is saying and the documentation that is there. If you can show that the supervisor has been changing his expectations, the supervisor has been disagreeing with you about the very easy to show accomplishments that you have made during this process, they're going to wonder, why is this supervisor doing it? And they're not going to wait to find out that the reason is illegal. They're going to want to stop it. They're going to want to take the supervisor aside and say, you can't do this. If you want to fire this person, you need to give us a good reason, and because it doesn't seem to be performance. They're trained to look out for that stuff because it's a way of protecting the company. They don't want to have a lawsuit later. And they aren't going to know what the basis of the lawsuit necessarily is, but they know when stuff doesn't add up. And when stuff doesn't add up, it gives a reasonable inference that there's something else going on. And if there is something else going on, why isn't that the reason if it's not illegal, right? That's essentially the question that a lot of HR people will ask themselves, and they won't know the answer to that. They won't know the answer, and they'll get scared that if there is an answer that could be illegal, they want to avoid that. So again, the hidden secret is just to be ready to show with documentation that you met the expectations and that your supervisor is aware of this fact. Don't let that end meeting be the first time that you were telling your supervisor, I did meet your expectations. Because anybody who is there, anybody who is reviewing this later will say, you had, between 1 and 3 months to be able to show this, and this is the first time you're bringing this up. I don't believe you. That's a bad situation to find yourself in. Have a plan B. Many of the clients that I've had who have gone through difficulties with their employer have found that when they switched jobs, for whatever reason, either because they got fired or because they quit, or because they settled their case, and part of that was that they were going to leave employment. Those people ended up being a lot happier in most cases. I think that for clients, you need to have a practical approach to this. It can't just be the legal. You need to have a plan B, and believe me, it is a lot easier to find a new job when you have a current job. You have a lot of credibility. There's nothing negative. You don't have to tell some new employer, yeah, I'm currently on a PIP. You don't have to tell the new employer, unless the employer asks, you can't lie to them, obviously, but you should be looking for a new job. You should be not staying in a job that you don't like doing unless you absolutely have to. Meaning, if you're very unhappy at this job and you have a bad relationship with your supervisor, and if you got a PIP, chances are pretty high that you've got a terrible relationship with your supervisor for one reason or another. Don't stay in that job and make yourself unhappy because you haven't looked for something else. So this is where I talk about a quick action plan for employees. So when you get your PIP, get clear goals. If they won't give you clear goals, if they're subjective goals, get a new rater, somebody who's going to review your work. That should be your number one thing when you get your PIP. Look out for those subjective goals because vagueness is the enemy of the employee. Talk to somebody who is independent. I can't stress enough that people who go into the PIP process look around at everybody else and blame others. And that may not be inaccurate, but you want to know. You want to find a trusted voice who can tell you that. You may want to talk to an attorney at that point because that person is going to help you sort through. That person is going to be a trusted advisor. He's going to rely on what you say to him, but he's going to be a trusted advisor in that he can tell you, you need to accomplish this. I've seen this before. I've been through this PIP process. I know how these things go. This is what you can expect. Get an independent voice who can give you some real feedback. Challenge the PIP. If it's being given to you for the wrong reasons, say that now. Ask for it to be withdrawn, ask for it to be modified, ask for a new PIP on a different basis. If you were supposed to sell 10,000 widgets and you sold 9,900 widgets, ask for that PIP to be withdrawn. Say, I was so close to meeting your expectations. Why are you giving me a performance improvement plan when I got 99% of what you wanted? Document your progress throughout the PIP. Okay, document that you are utilizing the resources that they give you. If they tell you to talk to this person to be able to get more information, document that you did it. Document that until you get to the point where you don't need it anymore. And then you say, I have done enough. What more do I need to do? And your supervisor will most likely not respond. They'll say, great, thanks for using the resource. I'm glad you used it. And if you can, get the resource, if that's a person, to say, I've talked to this person and this person fully comprehends what he's supposed to do. Employers may show that not utilizing resources was why you didn't meet their expectations. Don't let that happen to you. Document feedback and update meetings. If you go to feedback and update meetings, and most people who have PIPs do, document what happened. Document disagreements. Be nice, but disagree if that's what the facts say. Use facts to your advantage. Don't make this about recriminations. Don't make this about your supervisor not doing his or her job. Document what the feedback was, why that feedback was either right or wrong, and what you are doing to meet the expectations, because you don't want this in the end to look like you have not been meeting their expectations and knowingly not doing so. Similarly, document any factual misstatements. If somebody says you were supposed to sell 1,000 widgets last month and you did, show them that you did. If they say you didn't, show them that you did and say you misstated during our meeting that I didn't meet this expectation. Document any new or increased requirements. If you have a requirement that is coming from the supervisor that is new or has increased, like they're moving the goalposts, don't allow them to do that without documenting it. Finally, prepare for the fight. Prepare documentation that you met the goals. Okay? Meaning that by the end of this, you want to have emails over the course of weeks and months showing that you've been meeting every expectation that they've laid down. You want also to have a plan B ready. It's easier to go through this process if you have another job in your hand. At that point, if the supervisor is being truly unfair, you can say, thanks, I don't need this job anymore. And you don't wait until you've been fired to get that new job. Nothing that I've said in this video has been legal advice specifically for you. But if you do think that you've been the victim of discrimination or retaliation, particularly if you've received a PIP, you should contact an attorney as soon as possible, even if you're still in the process. Having an attorney who's experienced in fighting PIPs can be the difference between winning and losing at the end. My name is Kyle Ingram. I'm an attorney in Washington, D.C., and I represent employees who have been the victims of discrimination and retaliation. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I wish you the best of luck in fighting your PIP.